Good afternoon, everybody. This is Anil Gupta here at Wyebot, and along with me I also have Mike Gore, and we'll be walking you through the Wyebot dashboard and helping you understand if you just purchased Wyebot sensors and have deployed that, how to use that, the system to get the most out of it, setting up network tests, just the layout and everything. We'll basically go through a live demo of our system and not go through any of the marketing kind of material, but actually jump in right into the dashboard. So just lay out the agenda a little bit. So the goal here would be show you the organization of the Wyebot Wireless Intelligence Platform. Generally speaking, all of the new features that have been introduced very lately in version 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4. We will also cover, how to do automatic and manual device naming for access points as well as clients. And one of the other key pillars that we always talk about is the device forensics. So we will take a look at that for both APs as well as clients. And then many times we've seen people have questions around, the Wyebot dashboard allows you to create locations. So when to create them and when not to create them is something we will also cover. And then how to hide, unhide the issues. This was a feature that was recently introduced as well. And then at the end of that, we'll have some time for questions as well. And I would like to remind everybody that there is ability to ask questions in the chat room, and Mike is very actively monitoring those, and as they come along, he'll try to answer as we move along. Of course, we'll have time at the end of this as well. So here, once the user logs in, this is a system that here we have in our Wyebot office lab environment. Once the user logs in, the first thing that you see is what we call as the location level. So if you have a single location, then all of your sensors that you have over there would be listed under this location. You can choose or add other locations. I have many over here, test locations, but you can go add new locations as well. Now, one thing I would say, around locations is that many of you have different, schools or different buildings, and the concept of locations is more like a network. If really speaking you have different network configurations, then only it would make sense to create additional locations. Otherwise, if you have a handful of sensors, it's generally best to keep them all under one location, because the things that are per location are all of your configuration, the network tests, the SSIDs, and the sensor configuration, that goes along with that, all stays under one location. Now, at the very top level over here, what will happen is that this view gives you an aggregated view of all the APs, all the clients, all of the Wi-Fi networks that are seen aggregated by all of the sensors. You can certainly take a look here and click on the APs. So here, when I click on the access point, this is showing me access points from both of the sensors that we have under this location. And I can also do searching. So if I just want to say I want to look for Cisco access points, I can look at that, Cisco access points over here as well. Also, you will notice that all of the places, many places throughout the user interface, that there is this context-sensitive help available as well. So if you want to click and need some additional information, you can always click on that, and that brings up another window, where you can see help about that feature itself. The other thing that you'll commonly notice throughout the user interface is the ability to export data. So here I can export data into a CSV format by clicking at the bottom left of the screen. And next, the other thing that also goes along with this is the ability for device forensics, which basically allows you to look at the details of a given device. So sometimes you may know all of the access points that are in your environment, this can really come in handy when you don't know about devices. I'll just pick up something over here. For example, if this is a Cisco Meraki access point, when I click on this small magnifying glass icon to the left of this device, it actually brings me to analytics about this device. So this is a reverse engineered view of the access point, showing you the radios, showing you the SSIDs on that, the security configuration, the signal, etc. Now, one may argue that, okay, I already get this from my wireless LAN controller. Yes, that is true. Where does this really become interesting is when you have unknown devices. So as an example, this on high precision, let's try to take a look at that. Now, this happens to be a printer. So you can look at the SSID. It says HP LaserJet over here. If there is a student firing a hotspot or some guest user, firing a hotspot, you can look at those details, over here by looking at the SSID from that user as well. Additionally, one may also use these filter icons to the top right side of the tile. So one of them says my SSIDs. So if I apply this filter, it actually filters out, to show me only my AP. So now if I see here, we have these two HP access points over here. On the other hand, the more common use we have seen from many people is that they want to find out what are not mine. So this was actually a request that came in from many of our customers. So we've added that now. So you can actually say not my SSIDs. And in this case, of course, we are in a shared building over here. We see many others, and we have many access points in our lab environment as well. So you see a ton over there. But typically, customers who are in standalone buildings and don't have a ton of neighbors around them, they shouldn't see anything other than themselves over there. The other thing on the APs, many times it is extremely useful to be able to identify access points by names. So we have done our level best, possible to identify automatically the names of access points. So as you can see, some of them over here, like the Cisco access point, it is called as Boston AP01 over here. If I click on this magnifying glass icon, it actually tells me what was the source of that name. So the name was actually derived from Beacon, which is all passively derived. Now, we have added support for many different vendors to derive the names using many different methods. Cisco and Aruba, they definitely support AP naming inside of the beacon. Aerohive does have support for that as well. Ubiquiti has some LAN port MAC address, so we use many different methods to derive the names. Beacon name, or name inside the beacon is the highest priority item. If we can use that, then we always will use that. The second is that if we can somehow figure out the LAN port MAC address of the access point, then we also have the ability to do DHCP snooping on the LAN port. And we basically do reverse engineering of that one and figure out the name from the LAN port MAC address. So I may actually see something over here. Let me see if this one has it. So here we have not yet figured out the name using DHCP snooping yet, but you can see that we are showing you the LAN port MAC address. If the sensor happens to be on the same VLAN where your access point is, then eventually we'll be able to figure out the DHCP name of the access point as well, which can be much more meaningful. Now, you can always change the name. So here, if you want to, if for some reason we haven't discovered it or you just want to go manually override that name, you can always click on this change button over here and then go assign the name yourself. And if you happen to do that, then we will always use the manual name because you have given us that name yourself. We recommend generally that, if possible, try to use the automatic naming feature, enable the sensor to be put on a VLAN port so that we can do DHCP snooping. The only vendor for which, or the only popular vendor, I should say, for which we haven't seen any support is Ruckus. They have not added any support inside AP naming within the beacon. But we have support for Ubiquiti, we have Aerohive, Cisco Meraki, Cisco traditional controller-based Aruba, all of those are supported. And if you do not know how to enable that feature, you can certainly reach out to us. We'll help you with that. It's generally a setting in the controller interface that you can go and enable that. At this point, I'll move to the Wi-Fi client style. I'm still at the top level, which is the location level. We will shortly jump into the next level, which is the sensor level, but these tiles essentially provide similar kind of data. So if I click on the Wi-Fi clients over here, you can see that we show, generally useful information about the client, the name, the manufacturer, technology, SSID, where they are connected, the channel information as well. And again, over here, you can very easily apply the filter and say, I only want to see the clients that are connected to my SSIDs. Once I apply this filter, you can see that this number changed to a smaller number. And here, we have a couple different SSIDs, Wyebot Guest and Wyebot TLS, and we can see all of the devices that are connected to them. Additionally, you can also see that, we have figured out the names of these devices as well. Very similar to what you have for AP naming, there is ability to name specific devices as well. However, we do our best to try to get the names from DHCP. So here, for example, you may have received this invitation from Courtney. So here you can see this says Courtney's iPhone. So this name here, it is indicated in the parentheses that it was discovered using DHCP because, of course, the sensor has access to, the same VLAN where the devices are connecting as well.
And to that point, this is why we recommend that you put the sensor on a VLAN trunk port with access to the VLANs for the management interface of your APs, as well as any VLANs that the wireless clients use. We'll be able to discover more of those client names from DHCP that way.
Thank you, Mike. So, and in addition to that, you'll also notice that the sensor name and the AP name, if and when available, will make for much more meaningful information when you're looking at what we call as signatures, or even over here, when there is an AP name available, then that will be more useful, that where was the client connecting and what happened with that client. In addition, this may also be a good place when you're looking at devices. You can look at, issues that happened with that device past day, week, month. Now, this is, of course, in our office, we have pretty solid environment, so it's not showing any issues. Let me try to go to some of our neighbors, and pick something over there. So if I use any one of these clients, we can see that there were issues, that were happening in the past time with the client, and those can be observed by clicking over here. And you can click on that issue as well to see what actually happened with this client in past time. So this particular one happened in the past, within the last 24 hours, and you certainly have the ability to go to past week, month as well. And in the top section, you will see information that is identified about the client. This is all based on signatures and fingerprinting of the devices that we do. And this is the current status of the client, whether it is connected. Now, one thing you will notice, of course, is that we are looking at clients, all clients on the channel, whether those are connecting to my access points or whether those are connected to my neighbor's access points, all of them are shown over here.
No, I mean, so a lot of people have asked, I'm not interested in seeing my neighbor's equipment or things from that. And generally, you can filter those out. A lot of our signatures, some of them will work on only your SSIDs, meaning things you have the ability to change the configuration of. But many of our signatures will take all networks that we see into account, basically because they might be affecting your SSIDs, regardless of whether they belong to you.
Yeah, thank you. This next tile over is the Wi-Fi client distribution tile. So this one, the intention here is to show you a breakdown of all the clients that are connected to on the channel that your AP is operating upon, and showing you what percent of those clients are actually connected to 5 gigahertz, whereas what are connected to the 2.4 gigahertz network. And the reason all of this came from was most people want to have more and more clients on 5 gig because of better channels, more number of channels, lesser interference, and all of that. However, not every time is it true that it works perfectly. Every AP vendor has some form of band steering and band navigation, which you may or may not have enabled. The intention over here is to show you what percent of your clients are on 5 and 2.4, and of the ones that are on 2.4, what percent are actually capable and still not connecting to the 5 gigahertz network. So in this case, if I click, for example, here on the 5 gig capable, we can see that this client is actually capable of 5 gigahertz, but it is currently still connected to the 2.4 gig network. So that is something, that can help you decide what, if you want to do different kind of channel planning, manual band steering, or anything else that you may want to do, transmit power adjustment to do manual kind of, or tune your band steering algorithm any further. And again, over here, you can still, again, apply the filter very similarly. It exists in most tiles where you have Wi-Fi information. This next tile over is the Wi-Fi networks tile. So this is, again, a representation of all the SSIDs that the sensor can see in and around of itself. By clicking on a plus sign over here, you can, just see what BSSIDs are over there. So if in my case, actually, I can even just put in Wyebot over here. So now it starts showing all of the SSIDs that we have in the office here. As you can see, one other feature this kind of brought to light was that the hidden SSIDs are shown in bold and italics, and the other ones are, of course, shown over here in standard text. If I click on the plus sign, I can see the SSIDs, the BSSIDs over here by clicking on that. And from here as well, I can also click and go back to find out what APs these are part of. So that navigation of the forensics feature is available from here as well. All right, so now that we've seen a whole bunch of stuff here at the location level, let's actually jump into a sensor. So this sensor, this brings us to the second, or the more important, one of the very key pillars of the Wyebot solution, which is what we call as Autonomic WiFi. And as all of you may have heard when we first talked to you, that the sensor does have multiple radios in that, and two of those 3 Wi-Fi radios, they are always listening, they are collecting data, and then analyzing that data automatically, and then they generate metadata that gets sent to the cloud, which then processes them and shows you this information. So we often refer to these as signatures. So whatever you are seeing over here is essentially happening in real time. And I can click on something that is happening over here, and this gives me additional information about that issue. Now this one is more of a best practice one. We are saying normally most people have the same channel width, and this one is showing we have deliberately set ourselves like that. So if you have an issue like this, and this is also set up like this so that we can show you. Now, in our case, for example, we have configured our network. One AP is 40 megahertz, another one is 80. Now this issue is going to continue to bother us. If that is the case, and you were saying, I'm not going to actually change anything, you can actually click on this hide button over here, and then that issue actually goes away. So if I close this, you can now see that it shows me 5 major issues, 6 minor, and 1 hidden issue over here. If I click over here, I can see that hidden issue. If I want to unhide it, I can actually go in here and click on unhide. That is one way of doing that. And if I actually have, I'm just going to make one other issue go away just to show you what, so this one, let's say I just want to hide this issue as well. So if I do this, now we see 2 hidden issues over here. Now one method to unhide all of them is I go one by one and do it. The second or easier method is actually you can go to the advanced menu here on the left side and go to unhide issues and click on this unhide all, and now all of them will be back to the way they were, and you can see that all of the hidden issues are now gone, and we are back to showing 6 major and 6 minor. So this as I said, is showing you real-time data. You also have the ability to click and look at historical data. So in this case, I can look at, past day, past week, past month, of issues here as well. I can click on any point over here. So this is even, last month, February 28th. So, and by the way, I can also click and zoom, hold the mouse, and then move towards the right or the left, and I can actually go down all the way to 5 minutes of granularity if I needed to. So if I click on this point, now this is showing me what happened on Friday, February 28th at 11 p.m. And I can see all of these different issues were going on in the network. I can export this data as well on the bottom left by clicking into, this will create a CSV file. Additionally, if you want to generate some kind of report for somebody higher up, you can also export this in graphical format as well. Any and all of the graphs and charts, you will notice that there is ability to filter. So you can go over here and I say remove all the critical, or in this case there was no critical, so it didn't remove anything. But if I say major, so now I'm only seeing all the minor issues over here. And by clicking in, if it was hidden over there, you can see all of that data as well. And again, on APs and clients, as well, you can, once you are at the sensor level, you can look at historical data, for access points and clients as well. This goes back, and here we also show you by color. So, for example, the technology. So if you wanted to see, is there an 11B or BG AP, you can actually go and hide all of these, and then you can see, okay, yep, I actually do have a BG access point, which I may want to get rid of if this could be a printer or anything of that nature, and you can certainly look at that as well. And same thing for clients. By default, we show you the connected clients over here, but you can certainly click on the historical data, past day, week, as well. And of course, this count changes, represents by technology all the clients that are connected. 11AC clients being represented by the green color over here. And same feature set of past day, week, month is available. Exporting of data, all of that works very similarly to any other tile. Now, one thing which we did not see at the location level is this airtime utilization. Now, this data essentially is unique in the sense that the multiple radios of the Wyebot sensor, they are 100% of the time devoted to capturing and sniffing, which is different from any access point, not dependent on any AP vendor per se, because we are 100% sniffing all the time, whereas any AP, if you do like a data capture on that, it is actually going to do that in a time slice fashion because it has to continue to do AP functionality as well. Or unless you flip that completely into a sniffer mode, then it will be able to do packet capture of the data. Now, this represents how busy the channel is. And over here, on the bottom side, if there are any clients that are using more airtime, we will show those to you. And this does not represent how much kilobytes or megabytes of data necessarily they are transferring, but is a representation of how much airtime they are using, because it could be possible that there is a client that is using, much less, downloading much less, data, but because it's a slower client, it's actually using more airtime. And you can again also go over historical data here as well, click on any point. And where this does get really interesting and useful is when you're looking at trends of data over a longer period of time. As you can see, the management traffic, the interference, this is, of course, our lab environment, so it is high. However, when you go to the 5 gigahertz channel, then it can be different values over there.
A quick point on the trending that Anil talked about is, this is really the power of retaining the data for 30 days. That especially things like network tests, which we'll talk about shortly, but any other things you can see kind of quickly at a glance if things have changed or gotten dramatically better or worse over the past 30 days, kind of, quickly for a number of our tiles.
one of the key features of our solution also is the ability to, run network tests. The sensor has one of the radios which can actually run network tests against your own network. And the intention for that one is that you want to get the full 360-degree view of what is going on within your Wi-Fi environment, whether that is, RF interference, whether there is non-Wi-Fi interference going on, and then measuring the client end-user experience as well. And that is where the third radio of the sensor comes in, and it has the ability to act like a Wi-Fi client, connect to your network, and run a variety of tests. Now, any and all of the tests can be run on either the wired or the Wi-Fi interface. We offer a default sample set, which is populated. Many of them are useful in school environments, but many other people can use them as well. And you can go add your own tests as well. Before you can run the Wi-Fi tests, one of the only things that we actually ask you to configure is that you do need to provide us the credentials of your SSID. So before I show you the network test in detail, how to set them up, you will notice that, many of you, when you get the sensor up and running for the first time, there is a small exclamation mark that actually shows up. And actually, I'm going to just, kind of reproduce that over here. I'm just going to create a manual SSID just so that you can see what happens. So notice that on the left side bar, now a small exclamation mark shows up, which basically says that I made a change to my confirmed SSIDs, and therefore the system is now asking us that please make sure that these are all your SSIDs, and if they are, then you hit the confirm button, and then this exclamation and all of this extra yellow text will actually go away. So at this point of time, I will not hit the confirm button, but I will just go and simply delete this new one that I just created. Mine had already been confirmed in this environment. The important thing definitely when you have SSIDs, you got to go in and configure and put in the password. So if, for example, this is a pre-shared key SSID, I'll just go put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for now. Over here, you can just go hit update, and that'll just save the configuration for that SSID, and you will see that this now shows as configured. In addition, we also have support for captive portal. So any and all of you, who are using a web-based authentication mechanism, either for all of your SSIDs, any one of them, or have a BYOD environment whereby you allow guests and or students, to connect to your Wi-Fi network. So you select this checkbox which says captive portal, and then you select the vendor, and we have support for a whole bunch of them, very most popular, commonly seen vendors. And if you don't see support for your vendor, you can send us an email, as this checkbox over here says, at support@wyebot.com. So I can pick any. So let's say if I pick Cisco in this example, we've tried to really make things easy over here. The most common setups in places we've seen is that either you have like what we call as a click-through. What that means is the user gets a web page and simply says, I accept terms and conditions, and you're online. Many other people have something called as a login, whereby you do need to put in a username and a password, and you can put in that over here, and then the sensor will use those credentials, to connect to your SSID. Very recently, we've added support for Ruckus. I think that was one thing that was missing for quite some time. We've added support. Even more support is coming for different Ruckus APs as well.
So yeah, one thing just to make a note of here is that so we try to support captive portals for the most common types. If you've done kind of extensive modification to the default captive portal, it may not work with the system. And also, if you have any kind of like a token-based system, like where maybe the system sends you a text via SMS, that won't work with the sensor as well. It typically needs to be something static that you can configure on the sensor to have it get through the captive portal.
Okay. If any of you ever need to whitelist the sensor because you're not able to get your sensor captive portal working, by going to the sensor config page over here on the left side bar, you can get information about the wireless MAC address of the sensor and the wired MAC address of the sensor here as well, just in case, you want to do that. So we covered the My SSIDs piece, and this is what also gets used on the main dashboard over here when I'm clicking this filter as well. And so let's just go back to the network test piece now. So we will take a look at one of the pre-configured tests, but I do want to show you all the different kinds of tests that are available, and the setup is really very easy. So you can select any of these 8 different kinds of tests that are available. For the purposes of this demo, I'll just use, for example, a simple application test. So any and all of these tests, as I said, can be run on the wired as well as the wireless interface. So in this case, if I say I want to choose the wireless interface, once I've selected that, then the system asks me what SSID do I want to use, and these are all the ones that have been configured. So if I select, for example, Wyebot guest over here, it shows me the list of sensors that are available. Here I'm just going to put in something over here, www.office365.com. I can just add another one, for example, Google Mail. You can put in any applications that are of interest to you over here. And then the second important thing is that you have the ability to choose the schedule. So manually it simply means that you just want to run the test right now. What most people prefer is that you want to run the test periodically and let the sensor be in what we often refer to as a set it and forget it mode. So you configure the test once. You can choose any frequency that you want. Most common is 15 to 30 minutes, So if you use that, you can configure the test. Let's move this window here. And once you hit create, the test is created. Also, very, very important is on the bottom left, you see this notification checkbox. By clicking on this, essentially you are telling the system that if and when a test fails, please send me an email notification, and we'll show you what details actually are available about the test that is run. We do a full breakdown of every step that a Wi-Fi client may do or go through when it is running a test. So I'll pick from here, one of the common tests, which is application in this case. So here's the G Suite test, which is, set up. And in this case, essentially, we are checking many of the common Google services. If you're using Office 365, you can certainly set up appropriately that as well. And, once you set this up, let's take a look at how the results of these tests look like. So in this case, I can see that there is an orange color dot over here indicating that at some point there was some failure. So let's take a look.
Failure in the last 24 hours.
Failure in the last 24 hours. Thank you. Now, actually, it may be even better and interesting to take a look at this test result from the graph. So here, you can look at all of the graphs of the test. So here, I'll just use a G Suite test over here, and you can see that the test that failed actually is shown in red color over here. So I can actually click on this. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. So if there was a failure in the test, then you can click on that data point and you can look at that. So here it is telling me that the Radius server was unreachable at this point of time. So whereas if I look at a successful test, then you can see what details are shown about that test. This tells you when the test ran, how long did it actually take. It tells you the wireless connection time, the signal strength, the channel duration of the test, the response time from the Radius server, response time from DHCP server, all of the details about the IP addressing, the gateway, the DNS servers, lease duration, and then it further tells you whether that website was accessible, that application was accessible or not. It breaks down further into the response time from the individual web page and then the DNS duration as well. And all of this data, you can, the default graph view over here shows you the response time, And by the way, if this looks too busy, I can actually go and uncheck some of them. So for example, I only want to focus on Google Mail. I've done that. And now I can also look at, just the DHCP details as well. This is, I can go to past week view. This tells me all of the data, it's about 1 second, which is okay. And sometimes there was an error, and that's also shown over here. Then I can look at DNS details of each one of these as well. And I can also look at the radius response time over here as well. So I can see that generally speaking, my radius server has been responding within 200 milliseconds, which is okay. And all of the export features, which we talked about, those are also available as well.
And so it's these graphs where anomalies in your network will really jump out at you. So if you're running a test every 10 or 15 minutes, and you look at those results and you see there's certain times of the day where the network's very busy and maybe the DHCP server is slow to respond or maybe your radius server is slow to respond, those points just jump right out in the graph and make it really easy to track down those sorts of problems.
Sure. Thank you, Mike. So if I go back over here, there are a bunch of other tests, which are available as well. So in this case, you saw the G Suite test is available for both Wi-Fi as well as the wired interface. This lets you compare what is going on the wired side. There is a speed test, which is very, very popular amongst many people. If any of you are ever using the standard Ookla speed test or speedtest.net website, essentially this is that test. And you can specify over here on the right-hand side, what is the threshold that you want to use for your test. And if that threshold is not met, that is when the test is marked as a failure. So if I go back to my conference room sensor over here, and I look at that, this was again done on purpose. You can see that all of these tests are marked as failures because the download threshold speed was put in as 500 megabits, and the upload was also 500 megabits, and this wasn't achieved. So if I look at the details of the test, you will see that it is complaining that the download and upload throughput was not met. Both of them, because we got 239 in this case and 280, which is less than the 500 megabits that we have configured the test to for. One of the other things actually that was recently introduced, added as 2.4 feature, I don't know how many of you actually use that, but we added support for ETLS. So any of you using certificates, can certainly import your own certificate. I can actually try to show you over here. So if I just add a test one over here, and I say I want to use WPA2 Enterprise, you can choose the EAP type. If you're using the standard username password, most common in schools and enterprises, then you can certainly do that. But if you are using ETLS, you select that, and then you can upload your certificate. If it is a password, you put in over there, and then once it has been validated by the system, you will notice that it looks more like this. It'll say that who it was issued by, when it is valid from, and to, and now you can certainly do that test, against that SSID. The other thing that goes along with that is if you are doing adding new locations, you can go here into the management menu. You can just click on add, just type in the name of the location, and just simply adds the location. If you want to move sensors from one location to the other, you select the location here, and then you select what sensor you want to move it from, and you just click like this, and you can move the sensor to the other location. If you want to ever add additional users, to your account, you can certainly add. When we initially provision your user account, we create one typically for the person whom we were interacting with. But if there are other members of your team that you need to create user accounts for, you can simply create them yourself, enter the email address and the name. And there is actually an access level, admin as well as limited. Most of our users use the admin level, but in case you choose to use limited, you can limit the user to a specific location. If at all you want to do that, you can certainly do it that way as well.
So the limited user isn't a read-only user. They can still create network tests for the location that they're assigned to, but the one thing they can't do is they can't add new users or new locations.
The notifications are configured here in the Management Notifications tab. here you essentially specify, who gets notified. Again, all the users that are in your system, they will be shown over here. Network test as well. Similarly, you can specify who gets notified over here. And then this last tab over here, which is called as the client naming. Now, we had mentioned early on that we do discover the names of clients automatically. However, if you happen to have, or want to import a list of client names, you have either in your firewall, you're using Sonic Firewall or anything of that nature, Palo Alto, etc., and you have a list of MAC addresses and names of devices, then you can import that over here as well. You can add one by one as well. That is also a possibility. In most cases, the better or the easier option, the more plug-and-play option is to allow the system to learn, but we provide multiple options. As I said, one is to do manual naming, one by one, full import, automatic naming via DHCP, and for client names, actually, we support essentially DHCP snooping-based client naming, and we actually also have a test, which is network discovery test, that also allows the system to learn the names of devices on wired and wireless interfaces as well. Actually, one of the tests on the network test side, which I did not cover, which is extremely useful, is the iPerf test. So this test can be run if you have multiple sensors, or I should say that it can be run easily or easier when you have multiple sensors. The way this test essentially works is very similar to the speed test. It's testing speed. However, you can eliminate some of the external components, which generally can become part of the equation, your ISP, your gateway, your firewall, etc., by doing a Wi-Fi, iPerf test, because that essentially goes from one client to another server. And in this case, my client is the cafeteria sensor, or the sensor named cafeteria, the sensor named conference room, and the server is the sensor named cafeteria. And once I run this test, there is no other, typically firewall or gateway involved, because these two devices are just communicating. One is acting as a client, goes over the wired Ethernet connection to the other sensor, and now the results or the numbers that you get are very representative of the speed that you can get on your Wi-Fi network. The other thing that we on the advanced page, we also have the ability whereby you can actually download a packet capture file from the sensor. We don't expect that you'll be doing this every day, but where can this come in handy is that if you ever get into a situation whereby there is some problem and you are contacting your AP vendor, it happens to be a driver issue or something. We have seen a couple schools, we had whereby they had a smart board or something, and the AP vendor says, no, it's not my problem. The smart board manufacturer says, no, it's not my problem, and both of them ask the school or whoever is the end user, can you provide us a wireless trace, because they don't believe you. In those situations, you can actually go and to the Wyebot sensor here, and you can download a wireless packet capture from the sensor. So if I can select the sensor from which I want to download the trace, in this case, let's just use the conference room sensor. I can say, the radio that I want to use. So if I say radio 1, and I can select, go back generally up to 24 hours. So if I say I want to trace from yesterday at 11 p.m., now I just go hit create. The cloud interface essentially has now sent the request to the sensor, and the sensor will now gather those, packet file and then make it available to the cloud. So shortly, this link will change into a download link, and you can download the packet capture file from there. While we wait for this to happen, we can actually go into this alerts. So if you wanted to be alerted of certain kind of situations, via email, you can certainly do that over here. One of the very common ones that people want to do is the sensor unreachable one. So this can be useful in the situation where you had a power failure or internet went down. Then you can be alerted And because of the fact that these alerts are actually generated from the cloud side, you don't have to have that there doesn't need to be like a last gasp power or anything like that on the sensor side. Once the cloud interface does not receive a heartbeat from the sensor, then it can automatically generate and send you this email alert. In addition, of course, there are others, over here as well. If you want to say that, okay, like we have put in a channel utilization threshold of 65%, but you say, oh, my channel is always 80% utilized, so I want to get notified, when it is greater than 80%, you can do something like that over here by clicking and adding creating those alerts. Let's go back over here. Oh, I think this, maybe my sensor over there is not running, but essentially you will see this, download link where you can actually download the trace from the sensor. The other thing that we may want to cover over here is the sensor configuration. For most part, you don't need to configure anything on the sensor. You can type in a name, you can put in notes where you've located the sensor. By default, the sensor is configured to run on a wired network and works via DHCP. It is certainly possible to change that to wireless, and if you ever need to, deploy the sensor in a location where you don't have an Ethernet cable that you can run in, then you can configure the sensor to do so as well.
The only limitation to running a sensor on wireless is that it's not available to run network tests. So typically we see people do that, as Anil mentioned, when they don't have Ethernet in a particular area, and maybe they've been getting some trouble reports from a classroom or a specific room. You can run a sensor wirelessly in there, let it gather data for a few days, and then examine the data afterwards.
Sure. Thank you. So, and this next tab over is the radio tab. Again, you normally don't have to adjust anything over here. The default behavior of the sensor is that it will automatically align itself to the channels that are used by the strongest, AP around it. Our general recommendation is if you can, put the sensor within 3 to 6 feet of the AP. However, that is not a requirement. You can absolutely put the sensor on a desk, or whatever chair, close to the client which you're trying to troubleshoot. Any and all of that is acceptable. But if given a choice, then try to put that within 3 to 6 feet of the AP. And in that case, it will automatically pick up the channels correctly. The one thing that you will notice over here is that there is this feature called as Track SSID. And when we first time ship you a sensor, the setting looks like this. Both of those radios, they are one of them is set to 2.4 gigahertz. The other one is set to 5 gigahertz. And, you do have the ability to set the channels manually yourself. You can do any and all of that, certainly. But most people leave them, at auto channel, which allows the sensor to select the best channel automatically. Once you have confirmed your SSIDs, what we actually do is we go and populate this area for you automatically, whereby we tell the sensor that make sure you are selecting a channel that is being used by your SSIDs or my SSIDs. And that ensures that if there is a neighbor, sometimes we've seen that the sensor is sitting right next to a printer and the sensor happened to pick the printer's channel, So those kind of situations can be avoided by confirming your SSIDs. Mike, anything else?
Yep, that's generally the case. For a lot of our, K-12 customers, for sure that, within a school, you're only going to pick up the SSIDs that are in your school. But for people that are in more shared office spaces or closer to residential areas, it may pick up a stronger AP.
The other thing, this maintenance tab, again, most of you will not need it. However, we have seen a few customers who say that I have, I got 10 sensors, I got, 7 of them permanently deployed, but 3 of them are my so-called mobile sensors. So if you're moving the sensors around, you have the option of doing a clear data or factory reset on that sensor. The purpose being, if you had it like at an elementary school and now you move that to a middle school or vice versa or anything of that nature, then you can, hit clear data that will basically remove all of the historical APs, clients, everything, from the dashboard over here. so that you start off with a clean slate.
And those aren't necessary to do, but as Anil mentioned, if you want to clear out all the former history of it, you can use those.
And this event style, typically will show you events about, if the sensor went away or some new AP came in. Those are all actually shown over here with the timestamps, and you can certainly look at those as well. Some of the new things that we added recently was, easier navigation, and faster, of course, access to the user interface. You can select and go to the next sensor back and forth easily over here. We added support for ETLS, and the historical charts, etc., was all added recently as well. So I think we are coming to the top of the hour. If there are any questions, you can type away. Maybe Mike has already been answering some.
Yep, answering lots of good questions. So we'll give it another minute here. So if anyone has other questions they want to ask about, we'll try to do these sorts of meetings more frequently. If you ever have questions about the data that's on your dashboard, please send an email to support@wyebot.com, and someone here will be happy to kind of get back to you with what you're seeing. A lot of times people might say, hey, I'm not sure what a specific signature means, the output of it. We try to make those as clear as possible, but we're used to dealing with Wi-Fi, and we know other people might not be as familiar with it. So please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll get those answered for you.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your time. And as Mike said, we'll keep doing more of these sessions as we move along. Thank you. Bye.